welcome to the show. Jason, how are you doing?
Hey guys, good. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you.
Thanks so much. Where do you want to
Jason,
start this, Jordy?
we've actually met in person once,
Oh, really?
randomly, at a restaurant that was one of my favorite restaurants in Malibu. We met, and then the restaurant shut down like a month later. I was super bummed.
Which restaurant was that?
It was was it something? It was right by Whole Foods. There's a hamburger place there now.
Oh yeah,
Like Coconut, the Real Coconut.
Real Coconut was there. That's correct. You're right.
Tragic.
Yeah.
It's a that spot was the best. I don't know what happened, but
That was
Malibu's
a good
tough
spot. They had a hard
it's
time.
It's a tough market.
Yeah.
It's a tough market. Rents are high there for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, great to have you on. We've both been looking forward to this.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to just take your temperature on your view on the current state of venture capital and startups. Are things getting better? Are things getting worse? It feels like people are raising more capital than ever. Potentially there's a bubble. Potentially at the same time, companies are getting to really high run rates. What's your feeling for the health of the startup economy in the tech world generally?
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is I usually look at the ideas. I don't really care so much about the funding side of it because if there's cheap money, easy money, there's going to be cheap money, easy money. If it's hard money, there's not going to be as much around. There's always going to be fluctuation there. I look at the ideas. Obviously, there's a lot of people building a lot of things right now, which is very exciting. I can't remember a time when more people were building more things, truly, except maybe at the beginning of the web, late 90s kind of thing, where everything was new. No one knew what they were doing. And so they're just making stuff. Like the early enthusiast web was pretty spectacular. So I think that that's very, very healthy. That said, the hardest thing is not making something. The hardest thing is maintaining something. And it's become so easy just to make stuff and kind of just like vomit out ideas. And I mean this in the best possible way. You know, AI makes things really fast. You can make something really quickly that's sort of decent.
Yep.
It's ephemeral.
But it's ephemeral. And the thing is, like, you have to prop that up. You have to keep that up. You have to support customers. If you sell your product to people, like, people are going to be using this. They're going to be depending on it. And so I'm a little bit concerned that there's too much energy right now focused on just spitting out new ideas and not as much invested in maintaining something and seeing it grow and seeing it through to fruition. So there's a lot of bragging about, look how fast I made this thing. Yeah, you made a thing, but now what? That's my big question. And I'm not seeing a lot of answers there yet, but I still am excited by all the things you can do today. Yeah. What's your take? I mean, do you notice that? I feel like I must be other people that notice this too.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean,
Well, I
we've
think-
talked about the iron law of the universe. What goes up quickly must come down quickly.
Well, I think to
and
me,
there's plenty
yeah,
of
to me,
stories
to
about
me,
these entrepreneurs.
there's a very messy middle, right? I actually love the fact that software can be ephemeral now, right? I like that an app could basically be a meme, right? How many people over the last couple decades have had an idea for an app that it's not worth spending $1 million in a year building it, but it would be fun for it to exist. And so I like that things can come to existence quickly, right? I like that you can generate an image that I never would have paid somebody to make a 3D render of, but is actually entertaining and fun, even just it's just a very casual format, right? Obviously it has business applications as well, but John and I will generate images.
Like, what if I put a wing on a Cadillac Escalade with a racing livery?
Yeah,
I can imagine
stuff,
that now.
simple stuff like that. And then
mix a
and then
Porsche
there's
the car with a Cadillac Escalade. See what comes
Exactly.
out.
That's exactly my prompt.
Yeah.
And I probably could have hired a designer to do that, but it would have taken a day and cost a bunch of money.
And that is, like, it's incredible that you can do that. I love that stuff. And I actually think what's going to end up happening is a lot of people are going to make software just for themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's that's how I got started. I made software for myself. I was using something called FileMaker Pro way back in the day. And FileMaker Pro is the easiest way to make, like, an application that kind of ran. I didn't know how it worked behind the scenes, but it ran. That is a great feeling and a wonderful place to start. So I'm all for that.
Yeah. And where I was going is there's kind of the opposite spectrum of software that's really craft driven software. Somebody on the show, I think it was Jack Altman, was talking of this like Jiro Dreams of Sushi form of software where you're looking at an existing product category and there's a bunch of tools that already exist and just looking at it with a new set of eyes and just saying, I'm going to spend more time obsessing over this one product experience than anyone else, and I'm going to make a great product. And I think that's great. That's kind of like, you can still use AI to do that, but it's not just, slop, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But then there's this interesting messy middle right now in venture where you have 20 of the same 20 different teams approaching the same problem, and both everybody's kind of racing at it without a lot of real vision or craft. It's just about speed and just spewing stuff out and seeing what sticks. And I think that is sort of an unfortunate byproduct of the state of things today. And it wasn't always that way, right? It used to be VCs weren't going to fund the eighth company attacking one problem.
Yep.
And at least for the last 5 years, it's been the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems a little bit more like music now, actually, in a sense, where there's a lot of people making a lot of music. You open Spotify, there's like, a billion artists making something.
Yeah.
And software is now becoming that, which I think is pretty cool, actually, frankly, that there can be a lot of people, because there's a lot of talent out there. That's the other thing. Like you turn on YouTube or you watch YouTube or you pull up Spotify and you're like, I'm trying to learn drums and I'm trying to learn a bit more guitar and I'm trying to learn how to draw a bit better. And you find all these people online who are just extraordinarily gifted and talented at what they do. Yet nobody knows who they are, or if a small audience does, they'll never make it big because it doesn't work that way. But there's just so much talent. And what's cool about, I think, what's happening now is that if you have the talent and the imagination, you can actually make something today that before you had to maybe find someone else to make for you, which would have cost money and would have been hard to do. So I think this is all ultimately a very good thing. But I can imagine, I mean, again, I'm not really in the finance world or the venture world in that way, but I can imagine how you have to put more and more faith now. Maybe it's always been this way, but more and more faith in the people and not just sort of what they quickly make, because it seems like making something quickly is not the hard thing anymore. It's like, are these people, is there conviction there? Do they care about what they're making? Are they just trying to spin something up? I think there's a little bit more character evaluation, perhaps, that's going to be necessary.
Can you talk about lessons from the first wave of the internet, the dot-com boom, versus the rollout of AI? The bull case for AI's rollout is that, well, everyone's already on the internet, so they can just visit a URL and interact with a new product. Stripe already exists, and so they can start charging money immediately. The kind of bearish case that we've been hearing is this idea that, well, there are plenty of scaled internet companies that are still in founder mode, and I don't know if you believe in that ideology, but this idea that Mark Zuckerberg is not asleep at the wheel. He is very much aware of AI and can move very, very aggressively with huge resources to stay relevant. And there are also plenty of companies in the $100 million revenue, $1 billion revenue categories that are already moving quickly. They might be a little bit slower, but how brittle do you think big tech is right now? How brittle do you think are the companies that are in a category they've been in for a few years? We talked to a few founders where they almost got bored pre-AI and now they feel reinvigorated. They still control their companies. How are you wrestling with all of that?
It's interesting. It's kind of like, well, there aren't a lot of parallels between the early days, because in the early days there was nobody. Like it was just like everyone literally like was just learning HTML and just making a web page.
Yeah.
It wasn't really, I felt like Amazon, when Amazon launched, that was like the first kind of thing that felt a little bit different actually to me. Like someone's actually putting this together in a way where you could do something you couldn't do before. That felt, buying books online, that whole thing. And in the early days, it was all about like, people were even afraid to put their credit card online. We couldn't even when we first launched Basecamp back in 2004, we couldn't even get a bank. Well, we eventually did, but to give us a merchant account, which is what you needed to charge credit cards. Now, like your point with Stripe, you just like sign up and you can accept cards, or Square or anything. Like we had to provide deep financials. They didn't trust this internet thing. They wouldn't even allow us to charge annually for things. We had to charge monthly, which is actually a good thing in the end. But we're going to try to charge annually. They're like, what if you go out of business in 6 months? We're on the hook for this whole thing. So you have to charge monthly. You charge your customers monthly, so there's less risk. It's fascinating times. It's totally different.
Totally.
What's interesting today about big tech is there's so much power, obviously in a handful of small, big companies, but a small group of these companies. But then again, you have something like OpenAI, right, which kind of comes out of nowhere a few years ago, in a sense, and basically is putting everybody on notice. I mean, you can do everything now with this command line tool, essentially. You can write software, you can generate images like you were talking about. Why would you Google anything anymore? You can do it better this way. And so there are always going to be brand new flashes that come out of nowhere that challenge big companies. Now, the thing is that OpenAI is now a very large company very quickly. So I think what you're going to
Well,
see
one of
is,
the
yeah,
I,
go
I
ahead.
hate to cut you off, but an
No.
interesting point about the new generation of tech giants is that it seems like they're possible to build. You just need $5 billion, right? If you look at like TikTok
That's a
or
good question.
OpenAI, it's like
Yeah.
what are the truly breakthrough consumer tech specifically that
Well, there's
didn't.
something unique about foundation models that they are incredibly capital intensive that feels
Well,
different,
yeah, and
but I don't
the
know.
social network example is like, yeah, you can build a new social network. You just need to be able to spend billions of dollars on Meta and Snapchat acquiring the network.
Advertising, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but I think, yes, you're right. But also, we're always going to be surprised. The
Hmm.
next newcomer is not going to be the obvious one.
Hmm.
It's going to be someone with a new model for what social media is, or a new model for what search is, or a new model for whatever is. And they're always surprising, I think. And that's the exciting thing about it, is that if we just look to the existing players, like they're not really going to be able to innovate that much. It's just
Hmm.
someone new had to come along like OpenAI and they push everyone else to begin to innovate. So I don't know. I think there's always going to be innovation. I think most of it ultimately comes from the shadows, which is generally a small, tight team. Typically, it's
Hmm.
not a big companies aren't innovating in this way.
Hmm.
They will then jump on the bandwagon because they have the money and they can buy the incumbent or buy the newcomers. But the new ideas come from the small teams, the small guys, and I think that's still going to be true.
I don't know if you saw the Airbnb relaunch, Airbnb 2.0, but Brian Chesky has, I mean, I'd love your take on just, it feels like we were looking at the stock. It's been an $85 billion company for 5 years. It's kind of languishing. It feels like there's a little bit of restlessness, like he just wants to do something new. And I'd love your take on that. But also, he has advocated for this idea of like an annual release cycle, really pushing the whole team to unify around this Steve Jobs-esque keynote. And from a product management perspective, do you like that? Do you recommend that to other startups or tech leaders generally?
Yeah, good questions. So this just launched what, like 2 days ago. So I'm not
Yeah, yeah,
fully up on it, but what I know is he's basically now offering personal services and not
yeah.
just, rooms to
Yeah,
rent,
find a
essentially.
hairdresser, find a personal trainer, that type of thing, potentially dog walker. A lot of this actually launched Airbnb experiences 8 years ago with you're going on a vacation and somebody can be your local tour guide or take you river rafting, for example. But
Right.
now he's trying to broaden out to, get your car washed or get your car detailed, for example.
It's so interesting. When I saw this, so I had so many different thoughts, and I'll share a
Hmm.
few of them.
Please.
First of all, I think Brian's probably one of the greatest CEOs around today. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't bet against him, first
Yeah.
off. I was surprised by it. I understand there is no good place, trustworthy place to go to find these kinds of services.
Yeah.
So it's sort of natural that you'd expect somebody to do this, but you have to come with trust and you have to come with a big platform because it's hard to start small.
Yeah.
2 billion users.
2 billion users. Yeah.
Is that
Huge.
right? 2 billion. I
Isn't
mean,
that crazy?
so what they're doing is they're lending their trust and their sense of taste and like the vetting of these professionals who provide these services. That's a hard thing to do from scratch. Like you have to have the experience and the history, right? So while I think it's kind of far afield, actually, I think from what they do. I like the other version of experiences just off the bat,
Yeah.
which is more related to going to a place. This feels a bit tangential. That said, I wouldn't bet against them. I'm sure they've thought about this more than I have in a day and a half for like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But I was a little bit surprised by it. It almost felt like a little bit, in some ways, too easy. I don't know. I know it wasn't easy, but like,
Yeah.
or too obvious in a sense. But also, then you're like, but this hasn't happened yet, really.
Yeah.
So why not them? Why not
Yeah,
them?
totally.
Will it translate? I don't know. I looked at a bunch of them yesterday in my area, and I'm very curious. I'm very, very curious to see how this pans out. But I think you have to find revenue somewhere if you're a public company or a big
Yeah.
company, and There's only so many rooms. There's only so many people who want to rent rooms. They've done an incredible job
Yeah.
with this, and this is probably a good way to diversify the revenue stream. And it is related enough, even though it feels a little bit separate still.
Yeah.
But
And the
well, I
business
guess
is
we'll wait and
roughly
see.
the size of Marriott and Hilton now. Like it is basically a large scaled hotel chain. And so, yeah, what is that act two? It's a good question to ask. I did
One
want
way
to
to
get
think
your
about
take.
it,
Okay,
actually, if you
please.
it's more like a concierge at large. So if you go to
Yeah.
a hotel, right, you go to the concierge desk and you're like, I don't know what to do here, or
Yeah.
whatever. It's sort of like that without having to go anywhere. First of all, you can do it locally and you can do it where you're going. So it to me, I think of it as like the massive concierge,
Yeah.
and in that way, it ties nicely to hospitality.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
And on the annual release cadence,
Oh yeah,
that's going. It's coming from Apple.
yeah.
Chesky obviously looks towards Jobs as an influence, but smaller and smaller companies are starting to adopt it. But at a certain point, you're such a small company, maybe you should be releasing every week or every 6 weeks or something like that. So, what's your take?
Yeah, that's a great point. So, I admire it, frankly. I admire it actually for the patience. And I actually think in some strange ways, it is a better way to capture attention. So one of the things is like you want to release, people feel like they want to release a lot because they want to maintain a sense of presence in the market and want to get people's attention often. But I think what I found, at least what we found is has shifted over the years, is that when you release a bunch of small things, it's hard to grab anyone's attention with a handful of small things these days.
Yeah.
When you have a big release, a big drop, for example, and there's 100 new things. I saw Square just did this recently too.
Yeah.
You're going to pay attention to that, and you're going to be able to tell a much bigger, broader story. And I think in many ways, people are like, wow, that's a lot of stuff. Like an OS release or like,
Yep.
a new phone release used to be, things like that. I think one of the reasons people don't pay attention to maybe Apple's releases as much is because they become predictable in that way. So I think you
Totally.
can. I like what Airbnb is doing and other brands are doing, where it still feels a bit unpredictable what's coming.
Yeah.
Apple is too predictable now. It's like it's going to be a new iPhone
Yep.
and it's going to be a better camera and whatever. So that's not as interesting.
Yeah.
But I do like the model. Well, we actually have a bit of a hybrid model. So we release these little releases every 6 weeks or so. And then when we do a brand new, like we're working on Basecamp 5, which is our newest version of Basecamp right now, we're going to do a bunch of these little things, hold them all back, and then release them all at once. So that'll be like a big release for us. But as a model in general, I think it's a good model, but I don't think it fits a brand new company.
On Apple Intelligence, they kind of did the big annual release, but then they wound up shipping different things at different times. A lot of frustration. Is that something that can be overcome with just better product management, or do they need a different direction, more ambitious, more risk? I mean, generative AI is very unpredictable. You get hallucinations, very off-brand for Apple. What's been your take, and how have you processed the journey that Apple Intelligence has been on?
I think the mistake, again, like who am I? They're a $3 trillion company.
Yeah,
But
around there.
since you asked, the mistake I think they made is they made a promise. And promises to customers, I think, are typically very bad ideas unless you actually have something ready to go right now,
Yeah.
or like within a week or two or something. But there's nothing easier in business to say yes, coming soon, yes, later. And that's what they did. And now,
Yeah,
the only reason,
They sold the new iPhone based on Apple
It was on
Intelligence.
every billboard. And it didn't
exactly.
come for
And
months.
these now they're behind the eight ball simply because they promised.
Yeah.
Had they just talked about it, we're going to be rolling this out. Like, the expectations would be totally different. So a promise is a very, very dangerous thing to be made far in advance. This is one of the things that Jobs is really good at. When he had a product to share, he waited, then they shared it, and you could buy it today, or going on sale on a specific date, or something very close, right? He rarely had long-term tech demos or something. It was always about real stuff you could basically go buy. And this is also one of the things I hate about concept cars, which is you see these amazing things and these cool ideas, and you'll never be able to get them. And you're like, why does this company spend all this money doing these concept cars? And it's just frustrating. And that's kind of Apple Intelligence is a concept car. And,
Great take.
and it's tied to promises. Bad idea. So that's where I think they made a mistake. I think they will figure out a way to come back from this.
Yeah.
But I think this is going to lead to a major shakeup internally.
Yeah, it already
So,
has. There's already been people moving around.
right.
Does it
There's
worry
that.
you
Yeah.
that
But I mean, maybe a bigger shakeup, like people
Sure.
not just moving around, because moving around is like, this is the wrong analogy,
Okay.
really wrong analogy. But I mean,
Down.
the Catholic Church moved priests around when they made some big
Sure.
mistakes,
I
right?
see where you're going with
That's
this.
not how you solve the problem.
yeah,
Yeah, and not to compare
No,
some
it's
buggy
not.
software to some very damaging
It's not
things.
that.
But no, it makes
It's
sense.
not
It makes
that.
sense.
But
yeah. No,
moving
no,
someone
you're
it doesn't
expecting
really
departments
solve
when
the
they
problem.
blew it,
True new leadership in certain
doesn't solve the
roles.
problem, right?
For sure. Jordy?
does it worry you that the internet is killing long form writing? It feels like right now you actually get penalized on X the longer the post. You can still go decently viral with a longer form post, but usually like 4 words, 5 words seems like
But you need to
it's
clickbait
the
it.
most dopamine inducing, and it feels like there's a bunch
Why
of
is
great
no one talking about Steve Jobs? No one's heard about this guy. Click this thread.
no, but it seems like there's a bunch of really smart, high potential
Yeah.
people that don't think of themselves as writers, but maybe if they joined the internet when you did, they would be.
Yeah, I mean, I think long form writing has found a new place though. Like you have Substack, which has
Yeah.
become obviously a big deal for a lot of people. I think that these platforms, what's interesting is that X now, obviously allows you to write long posts and they even have articles,
Yeah.
but they don't really, like you said, they don't really promote them as well.
Yeah.
That might change. I don't know. Who knows? I'm sure they have a better insight into it than we do, but I think long form writing is alive and well. I think humanity actually craves it and wants it. But it's not an engagement thing. So if you're measuring that,
Yeah.
hot takes are going to be, more of that. But I don't know. I think it's alive and well, and I think it'll always be appreciated for what it is by those who are motivated to understand what it is that they're reading. If you just want to kind of absorb it like candy, that's fine too. But like if you really want to get into something, it needs to be long. And also like long podcasts are a great example. That's essentially long form writing that someone's reading out loud. And there's a lot of people who are willing to spend 2, 3, 4 hours listening to a podcast. Granted, they could do something else while that's happening. That's a little bit different than reading. But I think long form depth, let's call it just depth. Let's call it actually, instead of long form, it's like depth versus shallowness or shallow versus deep or whatever. I think there's a lot of interest in deep still.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it says something that the platforms don't necessarily reward deep, but it's again it's somewhat of a barbell where if it's deep but truly groundbreaking or moving, you'll still get that sort of
Yeah.
viral.
I mean, there's that
pickup.
guy, Chris Pike, who keeps going viral with just drops a link to a Google Doc. And it's just such an interesting post that it still breaks through, even though links are banned and no one reads long form. Every time he drops one, everyone clicks it.
Well, in the end, like it is like if it's good,
Yeah.
it'll surface.
Always.
I do think that contrast is very handy though. So with a lot of short form platforms, X, TikTok, with these kinds of things, you create a contrast now. And so now where you can get long, where you can get short.
Yeah.
And I think each platform will cater
I
to
mean,
its
this
different
show
audience.
will be experienced as a 3-hour live stream, but also I'm sure we're going to share a 1-minute clip
Clips.
of this, right?
That's right.
And that's just kind of the nature of the internet. I want to talk about the hyperscalers and AWS. You recently moved some data on Prem. My question is there some sort of cartel dynamic going on with the clouds? Because you would expect these are fairly commoditized products. There's Azure, AWS, GCP. Why do they have high margins? Is this some sort of like Coke and Pepsi thing where they have a tacit agreement not to get in a price war? Because you'd think that you'd be able to just go and get to some base level cost with 3 hyper competitive companies in the space.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that costs would be driven down considerably, and maybe they haven't been in some areas. I mean,
The airlines are directly competitive. They make no money, right? Airlines, famously bad business. You would expect the cloud to be similar, but it's not the case.
Yeah, I wonder if yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer there. I mean, I know that well, storage is cheaper than it has been, but in general, I think what they're selling is convenience, and convenience is always expensive.
Sure.
So you go down to the corner store, the bodega, whatever, you're going to pay more for whatever for your Tide laundry detergent than you are if you buy it at Costco. because you got to get in the car to go to Costco. You got to buy
Yep.
more. If you need something really quick, you go down there. And really, cloud services, what we've determined, at least what we feel, are like it's about convenience. You
Hmm.
can spin up really quick. You're not, you don't have to learn a lot of deep sysadmin stuff. Technically, you should know this stuff, but you don't have to. And so you're paying for convenience. And I think that that's always going to have a price premium. What we've
Hmm.
realized is that for us at our stage of development, been around for 25 years now, it's wildly expensive to host in the cloud, to use cloud servers, and on-prem can save us a ton of money,
Hmm.
and it's not hard anymore like it used to be. It's gotten a lot easier. You still have to have the knowledge, but it's not as hard. We're not as afraid of it. We're saving millions and millions of dollars now, not paying Amazon their fees. But again, if you're starting up right now from scratch, you're going to try something out. It does make
Yeah.
sense to start in the cloud because you don't want to invest anything else any more than you need to. And it's a good place to begin, but it's also a good place to leave. And we do this in life all the time. We start somewhere and then we become more expert at something and then we leave the beginner version of something and we go pro, whatever.
Hmm.
Like to me, going pro is going back on prem. And I think you're going to see more and more companies who've developed something who have now have a steady, substantial, sustainable model revisit
Hmm.
the cloud and probably go on prem.
Big cloud. They don't want you to know this one simple trick.
Going on prem.
Yeah.
I mean, back on big tech,
Yeah.
I've been personally very disappointed with the rollout of Gemini in Gmail. It feels very bolted on, turn and long email into some bullet points. I know how to skim. Is there an opportunity for a greenfield AI email product? We saw this with Mailbox in the mobile era, kind of creating the swipe pattern. That exited to Dropbox, kind of a good outcome. They wound up shutting it down. But what are you thinking about the future of email? Obviously, you're deeply invested.
Yeah, I mean, we have a product called
Yeah.
hey.com, which is, we don't have any AI in it at all.
Hmm.
Um, my feeling is that a lot of this stuff's actually going to come to the OS level. So
Mm.
like the idea of being able to like summarize a document or shorten some writing, it's already in Mac OS,
Yeah.
probably in Windows. I don't know enough about what's going on in the Windows world, but I
Yeah.
should. But you can select some text and like do whatever you want with it. Like you don't need to build that into your product.
Sure.
I think the AI side of it is going to be handy for obviously search, finding things you don't know how to describe. That's really
Yeah.
useful. I'm not a big fan, frankly, of the idea of like AI telling me what's important and what isn't.
Yeah.
I think it's too easy for it to miss something and then you being really pissed and missing something. So
Playing telephone.
say again.
It's like playing telephone,
Yeah, it is.
with
There's something's lost in translation. Like I don't want those hands in my stuff. Like I get a lot of emails. I know who's important. I know how to get the stuff. I screen, with hey, you can say, I don't want to hear from these people ever again. You'll never hear from them again, things like
Great.
that. I want some human control over that,
Yeah.
but I would like to be able to search better. I like to be able to find things by describing them in different ways. I have some curiosity around that. We're exploring some things there. So I
Yeah.
think mostly search and surfacing things in blind spots.
Yep.
This is to me where I think AI is very handy. It's like insights that you wouldn't have known otherwise,
Hmm.
but not like here's what's important. But
Yeah.
by the way, did you know that this, that, and the other thing? Or hey, you used to talk to this person a lot. Now you haven't in a while. Like, why has this gone cold? Or this conversation you reply, there was 8 or 9 replies back and forth, and now it's gone cold. Like that kind of stuff, I think is actually quite handy.
Or you've archived 25 emails from the same sales representative. Do you want to just block them at this point?
Things like
That's what I
that,
want.
like the as if someone's
Yeah.
watching over your shoulder and making a suggestion.
Yep.
context.
Yeah, context. So I think that's
Cool.
where I think you'll see a lot of this. But the whole like summarization, shortening
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't. That's
Yeah,
going
I
to be
agree.
OS level stuff.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you so much, Jordy.
Yep.
We all done?
I mean, if you have another minute, I know
Sure.
Yeah,
we
yeah,
have
of
to
course.
jump in a second, but
Yeah.
I have this theory that most people in tech that say they want to build $1 billion company just want $2 million a year of free cash flow, and I think that that's like I think that like literally 90% of people that say they want a unicorn just want
A stable income.
couple
that
$1 million a
allows them
year,
to fly
right? And it's more
first class.
But I'm curious. So that's my opinion. I'm curious if you have some sort of high level point of view on what people in the technology industry get wrong about money or wealth.
Yeah, that's a really nice question. I think $1 billion would be a burden, frankly. I don't think I wouldn't want that. I don't care about that. I don't see what the point is of that. If you, let's say, have 10 million, 20 million, like you are going to live the best possible life that you could. And you're not going to have all the massive, massive weight on your shoulders from having $1 billion or the expectation that goes with that. My general feeling is that you should want to build a business that takes care of you nicely, takes care of your employees nicely, and is sustainable over time. The idea that you want to build it big. I know a lot of people who built massive businesses on paper, billionaire valuations that ended up with close to nothing, except a lot of sleepless nights, exhaustion, and frustration 15 years down the road when they realize that they diluted themselves into basically nothing. The market changed and they have nothing now. I think what you want to build is a business where you can take money off the table as you go. Whatever that looks like, if it's 100 grand a year, if it's $1 million a year, if it's 3 million a year. But the more money you can take off the table as you go, I think the better off you're going to be. Versus trying to pile it all back into the business, reinvest, and bet on the future that you don't know is going to happen. I think a lot of people actually end up in a deep stage of regret when they realize that they have nothing left after they put in all that work.
Well,
So my advice would be build something where you can take money off the table as you go. And if you're in it for 10, 15 years, you're going to build a nice nest egg, a really good one. It could be tens of millions, could be 100 million. And you're going to be extremely happy that you did that because you don't know what's going to happen in the end, except this. Every business dies.
Yeah. Well, next time you come on, we'd love to introduce you to SoftBank. I think we could line up a really massive round for you guys, really put you on a different trajectory. I think it'd be great for you, actually.
We were joking before you joined. Some one of these platform venture funds comes there. There's definitely a number for Basecamp that might be tough. But what you're saying, that the challenge is venture capital is fundamental. Even $1 of venture capital becomes at odds with this idea of taking money out of a business as it goes, because the VCs will just say, I don't want a distribution of $100,000 this year. Right. Go raise another 20 million. And it's the reason I brought it, up is because we're at this period where seed stage companies will have $10 million of revenue, right? We just heard from a friend of ours yesterday. They invested in a company that came to them ready to do their first financing with $10 million in revenue. And it is interesting because AI is giving people more leverage than ever, more ability to build these sort of big, fast-growing businesses with a limited amount of resources, and yet venture capital is doing its thing. But it's great to have you on the show. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
This is great. We'll talk to you soon.
Love to have you on again soon. Cheers.
Bye.